Wyoming gun owners versus state of Wyoming. It's been a major federal lawsuit, guys. You've been involved in it. You've heard parts of it. We've never been able to give you the full story. Now that we've won in court, that all changes. Check out this video. Hey guys, Aaron Dorr here with Wyoming Gun Owners. We have been talking about this federal lawsuit with you guys for just about 3 years to the day. We've given you guys as much information as we can. We could never give you the full story because obviously we were involved in a federal court case against the state of Wyoming. But if you have not heard, just in the last couple of weeks, we scored a major victory in the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, and we believe this is going to be the final word on this entire saga. We're going to break it down for you guys, give you guys the timeline, a cast of characters, and kind of explain the backstory as to how we got here. It's a great story. It's a story of absolute, unashamed victory, both in the legislature, at election time, and especially in federal court. And it's a harbinger to small-minded little tyrants in the legislature. It's a reminder to our governor. It's a reminder to statewide office holders like former Secretary of State Ed Buchanan and AG Bridget Hill that there are some organizations who will go all the way, that we will not be cowed into silence, that we will not meekly submit in fear, and that we will find a way to find justice. And that is exactly what we did here with Wyoming Gun Owners. So let's begin with a timeline of events, all right? So I'll go way back, and I'll kind of speed it up here. Everyone remembers, if you don't, you should remember, hopefully, the 2018 session here in Cheyenne. WYGO ran a great program that led to the passage of one of the nation's best stand your ground laws at that time. Now, it was a fight. It was a fight. Shouldn't have been a fight, but it's a fight because we all know this. We have a lot more rhinos here in Cheyenne who would be Democrats in any other state than we have actual conservative Republicans. And so, while it should have been an easy fight, it wasn't an easy fight. And passing a stand your ground law meant that we had to break some eggs, to use that expression. We had to put pressure on Republicans who were trying to screw us. Some of those names include people like Drew Perkins, who is now Governor Gordon's chief of staff. During that fight, Senator Perkins ran amendments that nearly gutted the entirety of stand your ground law. Now, we fixed all of that, or we fixed 4 of those 5 points with our own amendments later on that session, but it was an ugly battle from the beginning to the end. And we're not ashamed of that. We fight hard for the Second Amendment. We fight hard for our members, and we fight hard for freedom. That's the entire purpose of Wyoming Gun Owners. So even Governor Mead, everyone remembers Governor Mead. What a rhino. What a rhino Matt Mead was. Governor Mead, even after the bill was passed by the House and Senate, Governor Mead would not tell anybody what he was going to do. He had 3 days to either veto the bill, to sign the bill, or let it pass into law without taking any action. I actually went and found him at a bill signing ceremony. I had one of my children along with me. We walked up to the governor and I asked him point blank, what are you going to do with stand your ground law? And he proceeds, or he tries to unload on me. You're the guy putting so much pressure and being so mean to my friends. And I was like, bro, if they're voting against the Second Amendment or voting to weaken the Second Amendment, they might be your friends. They're not our friends. And more importantly, they're not the friends of the gun owners in their districts. So their problem is with our members. Sorry. And as you guys all know now, the next day, Governor Mead says, okay, I'm going to let it pass into law without signing anything. One of the people who we fought a lot that session, besides Drew Perkins, was State Senator Tara Nethercott. Here's a photograph of Tara. Senator Nethercott has been a thorn in the side of gun owners for her entire time in office. She routinely votes against things like gun-free zone repeal or campus carry or other types of bills to strengthen the Second Amendment. In fact, after stand your ground law was actually law, it was Tara Nethercott in the interim committee process who was talking about finding a way to reopen stand your ground law to weaken it. So again, memorize this face. Senator Tara Nethercott. You're going to hear that name again in a few minutes. And yes, this is the same Tara who ran for SOS, Secretary of State, in the primaries last year here in Wyoming and got her butt kicked by current SOS Chuck Gray. So that's the same Tara Nethercott for those who are trying to make sure we're discussing the same people we are. So that session ends, and we roll into the 2019 session hot. And what I mean by that is before session even began, we had state senators and state reps, all Republicans, because again, they're all Republicans here in Cheyenne, who were talking to the media about their intentions to file and pass into law Fix NICS mental health gun control. Now, the short way of describing this is you've heard of a red flag gun seizure. This is a red flag gun seizure light. It would pave the way for full red flag gun seizures in the state. And it had the underlying problem with it was similar to red flags. You could lose your guns having never been convicted of a crime in a court of law. I actually had the lobbyist who was pushing this, Nephi Cole. I should have a photograph of Nephi. I don't. That sucks. I'm sorry about that. But Nephi, and here's the funny chain here, Nephi Cole was one of Governor Meade's main henchmen when he was the governor. When Matt Meade left office, then Nephi Cole gets a job with NSSF, the National Shooting Sports Federation. So, by the way, if you're a donor to NSSF, don't forget, these guys are not your friends. Their lobbyist was leading the fight to pass Fix NICS mental health gun control here in Wyoming just a couple of sessions ago. Nephi approaches me the last day of session in 2018 and says, hey, man, next year when Governor Meade's gone, I'm going to be a lobbyist and I'm sure your mom was proud, right? And he's like, I'm going to be working on a bill to fix the Fix NICS here in Wyoming. Fix NICS. And we're like, oh, really? What does that mean? And he explained it to us. And he's like, you're not going to have a problem with that, are you? And I was like, yeah, Nephi, any bill that limits our gun rights, especially if it leads to a gun confiscation, absent a criminal conviction, yeah, we're Wyoming gun owners. We're going to have a real problem with that. And so that bill was introduced in that 2019 session. And from there, WYGO went to work, and we went to town on these guys. Bill Pownell, Senator Michael Von Flatteren, Representative Kirkbride, this whole gaggle of idiots who were working on this bill. We exposed them in their district before session even began with so much pressure, phone calls, emails, text messages, social media. We unloaded on these guys. And so before session even began, the day before session began, Representative Pownell announces, I am pulling the bill due to too much grassroots pressure, and we won that fight. But we didn't forget it. We didn't forget the fact that Republicans here in Wyoming wanted to screw us over on our gun rights, wanted to pass Colorado-style red flag laws, just simply repackaged and referred to as Fix NICS. And that's our job here at WYGO, is to have a long memory. And we never forget when a politician betrays your gun rights. In this case, didn't have to wait very long. The 2020 primaries were not that far down the road. And so as we approached the primaries in August of 2020, WYGO did what we do every 2 years. We spent a lot of our donor dollars to expose anti-gun Republicans who had done things like I just described, sponsoring Fix NICS. Or maybe it was Dan Furphy, who then was a state rep, now a state senator, who was sponsoring bills to mandate waiting periods on handgun sales here in Wyoming. We exposed incumbents like that, and we exposed wannabe challengers or challengers who wanted to be in office who refused to tell us where they stand on these issues. And frankly, we had a lot of fun doing it. We figure, you know what? It's like America and stuff. And so it's our First Amendment right to educate our members and the public on where the candidates stand on the issues of the day. And because we're a gun lobby, we focus on the Second Amendment. And you guys remember what happened. Election night, August of 2020, was lit. We had smashing success as gun owners up and down the ballot threw anti-gun Republicans out of office in droves. in droves. Senator von Flatteren, and I'm going to forget this now, he was in office for 16 years, 18 years, 120 years. I don't know what it was. This guy, a complete eel. I wish we had a picture. I have a picture of him here. No photograph of him. The guy is a complete eel. He was the lead sponsor of this. He was the most arrogant, condescending jackass you've ever met here in Wyoming politics, and that's saying something. He lost on election night by a margin of over 65-35 to now State Senator Troy McEwen. It was a bloodbath at the ballot box for these rhinos who were pushing gun control. Dan Kirkbride was gone. RJ Cost, I believe, went out that night. We had Bill Pownell was gone. I mean, it was absolutely brutal to be an anti-gun Republican on primary election night in 2020. And I went to bed laughing my butt off, very pleased. WYGO members stepped up to the plate. You guys gave us the budget we had to have to educate our members on where these candidates stand. You guys took the information that we gave you and did the rest, and it was a great night. That was August of 2020. Now, just think about this for a little bit. You're a heavy rhino politician in Wyoming. You're used to the Rhino Guard having complete control of what happens here in Cheyenne. And all of a sudden, this upstart gun rights organization, they call us upstarts. I don't mind it. I prefer Scrappy, but I'll take upstart. This upstart gun rights organization comes along with a small budget. I mean, small budget, relatively speaking, and we caused chaos all across the state on election night. You realize really fast, if you're a rhino, that if we don't deal with these guys, they're going to continue to do this. And here's a little secret. They're right. We're going to keep doing this. So October 5 of 2020, I'm in my driveway and I get a call from the Riverton Ranger newspaper. And I've never spoken to them, actually, which is odd. I've spoken to most media outlets in the state. Never heard from the Riverton Ranger. They have my cell phone. No big deal. Most people do in politics. And they said, Mr. Dorr, we're calling for a comment on the investigation. And I was like, investigation? What are you talking about? They said, the investigation against you and your organization. And I was like, what investigation? And they're like, you haven't heard? And I was like, you better enlighten me, bro. Actually, it was a gal. And she says, yes, you are being investigated and your organization is being investigated by Ed Buchanan, the Secretary of State, for alleged campaign finance law violations. And I was like, really? Really? I said, how'd you hear about this? And she says, well, I can't discuss that. And I was like, really? Because you're the first person that's ever told me about it. So sounds to me like this has been leaked to the media before I was ever even made aware of it. And at that point, she pretty much hangs up. So I get in the phone and I call the Secretary of State. Now, at that time, the elections division was run by this guy. Where is he? Where is this little dude? Okay, here it is. This is Kai Schoen. Kai Schoen at that time ran the elections division for the Secretary of State. And previously, I worked with Kai on our previous election cycles, and I thought that he was halfway decent at his job and actually seemed like he was somewhat fair and somewhat easy to work with. But that was before the 2019-2020 timeframe when Fix Nix led to these challenges in the primaries, and all of a sudden this kind of progression changed WYGO's reputation amongst the rhino class. So Kai Schoen suddenly went from being a guy who had been pretty decent to extremely hostile and caustic, that's the word, on the phone. And he's like, well, how'd you hear about this investigation? And I was like, look, dude, you guys told a reporter called me, is there an investigation? And he wouldn't confirm. And I was like, are you seriously not going to tell me if there's an investigation when the press is already running the story? And finally, Kai's like, well, there is an investigation, but I can't reveal any details. You need to talk to the Secretary of State. So I was like, all right, put him on the phone. Well, old Ed Buchanan wouldn't come to the phone. And I want to be super clear on this. The lawsuit name was Wyoming Gun Owners versus Gray. Everyone knows our current Secretary of State is Chuck Gray. Chuck Gray in the legislature was a champion for gun owners. as Secretary of State, he's been nothing but an ally for gun owners. That is not the Secretary of State that I was talking about in 2020. At that time, it was this guy, Ed Buchanan. Old Ed Buchanan. He is now Judge Buchanan, okay? Judge Buchanan. And I hope he knows more about the First Amendment now than he did back in 2020. But in August of 2020, he wouldn't come to the phone. He wouldn't come to the phone. So Kai Schoen says, email him and ask him for the complaint. So I did. I emailed the Secretary of State personally for, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, something like that. And at that point, we called a lawyer. And we had to get a lawyer involved because this guy wouldn't even confirm the dang investigation, as the media was running stories saying we're under investigation. And here's a little pro tip, okay? If you ever wonder if a investigation is a political hatchet job, one way to know is if the press finds out about it before you do. And so we knew this was bullshit from the very beginning, from early August of 2020. We knew it was complete crap. At that point, we involved Steve Klein. Many of you guys here who are involved in conservative politics know Steve Klein. He's been a lawyer here in Wyoming for a very long time, involved with lots of organizations here in Wyoming, and we retained him to help us in this fight. Steve is excellent at this, and so he got involved. We had to hire a lawyer just to get the Secretary of State. And again, it's not Chuck Gray, it's, say it with me, this guy, Ed Buchanan, former Secretary of State. We had to get a lawyer involved just to get a copy of the freaking complaint, okay? And so we finally get the complaint. I'm just going to guess now. I'm just going to guess 1st of November-ish of that year. I could be wrong by a little bit. And we get the complaint, and it's complete BS. But here's what was interesting to me. The complaint was sent in by the Cheyenne Chamber of Commerce. And I forget the name of the guy who signed it. That's their head guy. He's a big lobbyist here in Cheyenne. I forget their names because they all suck. And he signed it. And I did what I usually do when I'm trying to see who is coming after us. I pulled their financials on various online places like the IRS website to see who runs the organization. And when I did that, at that time, the most recent financials, they're called 990s. That's the IRS terminology. When I pulled the financials, I saw that their most recent chairwoman, and the paperwork always lags a year or so, you're never sure how current things are because it's always behind a year or so. But the current chairwoman of the Cheyenne Chamber of Commerce at that time was this woman. Wait for it. That's right. State Senator Tara Nethercott. The same woman who we fought tooth and nail to pass Stand Your Ground law in 2018. The same woman who watched a bunch of her friends like Michael von Flatteren get flushed down the drain in the primaries in 2020. She and the organization she's a part of signed this accusation against Wyoming gun owners. That was interesting information to get, to say the least. So from there, and this is a long story, so put it on 2 times speed. I don't mind. We want to get this all on the record so our members know exactly how pernicious these swamp monsters are here in Wyoming. So from there, we went on a back and forth with our counsel and the state's lawyers for a very long time. Because what Ed Buchanan, and again, that's not Chuck Gray, it's Ed Buchanan. Here he is again, Ed Buchanan, and he's now Judge Buchanan. I hope he doesn't rule on speeding tickets. I'm never in front of his court because I don't think that we're friendly anymore. So Buchanan immediately takes the complaint, and his job as secretary is to decide if it's meritorious. Well, of course, Mr. Secretary says this complaint is meritorious. He kicks it over to this woman, Attorney General Bridget Hill. Now, if you know how the process works here in Wyoming, we do not have elections for our attorney generals here in Wyoming. They are appointed by the governor. So this means that Mark Gordon owns the actions of his attorney general on every issue, because all he has to do is pick up the phone and say, yeah, we're not doing this. You work for me. Drop it. He didn't do that. So Mark Gordon, well, he's not directly a player in this. He's damn sure a player in this. So his attorney general, again, Bridget Hill, there she is. She now takes over the case in conjunction with the Secretary of State's office. And our lawyers go to them and say, look, this is crap. This is crap. This whole thing is crap. This is political retribution. We know it. You know it. We all know each other knows it. Just drop this and let our client move on. And Ed Buchanan, God bless him. And again, remember the name, remember the face, Ed Buchanan, because these guys have a way of coming back. They have a way of coming back. Today, he's a judge. Tomorrow, he wants to run for secretary of whatever, some higher office. Maybe he wants to run for governor. Don't forget these guys' names. Buchanan says no, and he makes a very clear demand to meet through our counsel. He wants a list of WYGO members who funded the program that we ran in the elections, in the primary elections in 2020, that paid for all of the digital ads, radio ads, text messages, emails, all those things that we did. He wants a list of your names, your name. Anybody who gave us money to help with this program, he wanted your name. And it was interesting because, of course, this is the whole point of our lawsuit. You can't tell hide nor hair what the heck this means. Do you want all of our donors? Do you want just the ones that gave money to this ad? How do we know? We don't earmark. And the state's lawyers in court said under oath, well, then in that case, they should give them all. And guys, that's exactly what we knew they wanted. They wanted a list of every one of our members. And I told Buchanan through my lawyer to go to hell. Now, I'm not sure my lawyer conveyed it that way, probably because they're paid by the word. So go to hell, 3 words. They probably use 3 pages, whatever. They're lawyers. You can't help it. We told Buchanan no. And Buchanan says, well, either you do that or you pay a fine of $500 because of your insolence. He might not use the word insolence. It's too many vowels, too many consonants, too many syllables for him. But that's what he meant. You know, it was clear that he was going to send a message that we are this little upstart. That was the phrase, upstart. I like scrappy gun rights organization. And we were going to come to heel. We're going to pay this fine if we're not going to give the list of donors. And so what do? You guys know what we did. We told them to kiss our tail. Instead, I did an email alert to you guys and said, hey, we need to find $500 to pay Ed Buchanan's First Amendment tax. You guys will help us? Will you help us out? And you guys were extremely generous. We paid Ed Buchanan. And who is that? That's this guy, right? Not Chuck Gray. It's this guy, Ed Buchanan, former Secretary of State. Now he is a judge, Judge Buchanan. The august Judge Buchanan. We paid the fine. And the media did exactly what I knew they were going to do. They said, oh, Wyoming gun owners, they bent the knee. Wyoming gun owners, they conceded. They paid the fine. Yeah, we paid the fine because you have to be a victimed party. You have to be an injured party to have status to sue Ed Buchanan and Bridget Hill and Mark Gordon and Kai Schoen and that whole gaggle in federal court. That's exactly what we did. So what they thought was us crying uncle and whimpering off in the corner. And I just got to imagine this. I just got to imagine that when they got our check for $500, I just got to imagine that Bridget Hill and Kai Schoen and maybe Mark Gordon, who knows, maybe Mark Gordon, but dang sure Ed Buchanan probably sit there. They probably went into someone's office and they popped a cork on a bottle of expensive stuff, maybe some 16-year, maybe some 20-year, I don't know, and sat back there and said, gosh, we got those guys. We sent a message. Well, June of 2021, a couple months later, we sent a message of our own. We sent our own message when we filed a federal lawsuit in federal district court in Wyoming against all of those parties alleging abuse against our organization and a complete unconstitutional law they were trying to enforce. I would love to see their reaction that day too. Sadly, I'm not going to have the pleasure of doing that. So we filed a lawsuit in court in June of 2021. And man, you would have thought that a bomb was dropped in Cheyenne. Everybody was stunned. No one believed we had the moxie to pull that off. And I want to give a huge shout out here because now we brought on additional counsel. We had the Institute for Free Speech. They're a incredible First Amendment law firm out of Washington, D.C. Their senior counsel, Del Cold, ran this entire case on behalf of WYGO. And man, these guys were a 1-2 punch that ended up being incredibly victorious for us in court. But I'm not going to get ahead of myself just yet. So we filed the court documents. And then, of course, as you probably know, it takes time. So we finally had, what's my date here? We finally had oral arguments before Judge Skavdal in Casper in March of 2022. So it takes time, right? Of course, big snowstorm. It's March. It's Casper. What do you expect? Big snowstorm. Got there early just in case. It was fun. It was a great time to be there in court to watch our lawyers absolutely beat the crap out of Ed Buchanan's lawyers, out of Bridget Hill's lawyers. It was a lot of fun. Later on that month, I think it was just like 2 weeks later, Judge Skavdal says, yeah, WYGO was right. Now, with any lawsuit, you're going to have a variety of arguments. You're going to have a variety of charges because that's how lawsuits work. So at the end of the day, he found he didn't like certain of our arguments. Oh, that's no question, but we won, and we won big. And so at that point, we were trying to decide, well, what do we want to do? Because, well, we won, the relief was limited to us. What that means is the judge says this law is unconstitutional as it pertains to Wyoming gun owners. And we would have enjoyed seeing the judge say this law is unconstitutional, period. And it can't be enforced against anybody. But to do that, we'd have had to appeal our own victory. And that sucks. That was tough. We didn't know what to do. But I had a sneaking suspicion. I thought that the voluptuous arrogance of this guy, what's his name again? That's right. Where is it? Come on. Show it. Here it is. This guy. Man, it's not working. It's embarrassing me. Computer's not working. I knew that Ed Buchanan was so arrogant, he would certainly appeal his defeat. Now, when his face pops up here in a minute, don't blame me and the computer's being slow. So we knew that Ed Buchanan's arrogance was such, he would certainly appeal his defeat. And if he didn't, we knew she would. There, that comes up. Bridget Hill. We knew Bridget would. So between Bridget Hill and Ed Buchanan, we knew there he is. There's my friend. I don't know where you went, Ed. We knew they were going to appeal, and they did. And so once they appealed, then immediately we appealed. Why do you do that? Well, I had to learn this myself. I didn't know how that part of the process worked. If the state appealed only, they could drop their appeal later on, and the entire thing would disappear. We didn't want that. We wanted to get a bigger victory and get even bigger relief in circuit courts. The moment the state appealed, I then had our lawyers file our appeal. Now it's cross appeal. Now neither side can drop their appeal and just simply let it go. And that's what we were wanting to do. We wanted to lock this sucker in, and we did. And so that was, I don't know. That was fall of 2021. I'd say August-ish of 2022. So we cross appealed. And at this time, what else is going on? It's August. I think it's August of 2022. And what happens here in Wyoming in August every 2 years? It's election time, right? It's election time. So we're in a weird situation. We couldn't do the things that we do. We couldn't educate our members. We couldn't expose gun grabbers had we not won in district court. But we did because Judge Skavdal said the law was not applicable to us. And so we took that victory and we went to town in the primaries in 2022. You guys all, that was only a year ago, just over a year. You guys all know that. So remember, this little lady, there we go, Tara Nethercott, she is now running to be your Secretary of State. She wants to replace, what's his name? That's right, Ed Buchanan. Now it's working. Good job. And she's running against Chuck Gray. Chuck Gray was a state rep, like I said, for years. He ran gun bills for WYGO. I think he ran some. If he didn't run some, he was like a lead co-sponsor for us, and he was always an ally on the floor, arguing on the floor to advance pro-gun bills, and he played heavily in our fight to pass stand your ground law in 2018. So Chuck Gray wins, And it was by a big margin, not some small margin. He wins. Nethercock, she's gone. And now we have a new Secretary of State because Ed Buchanan got himself a sweet little judgeship that he can now go and retire into for the rest of his days. So now WYGO is suing pro-gun state rep turned Secretary of State Chuck Gray. And that, honestly, that made me chuckle. I mean, it was just weird. It was just weird. We were suing the Secretary of State, just that the men changed roles during that time. So now our lawsuit, forever and for always, well, I wish it said Wyoming gun owners versus Ed Buchanan. Now it says WYGO versus Chuck Gray. Oh, well, it is what it is. So the case is renamed, and then oral arguments are scheduled for January of this year. We finally got to 2023 in Denver because now we're in circuit court. And the good news here is that circuit court, for those who haven't been through this process, when they make a decision on a case, that is binding precedent, not just for us, but every state in their circuit. I should have a map here. I don't. That's a mistake. But certainly 5 states, maybe 6 states comprise the 10th Circuit. And that's a great victory then for a lot of people in the western part of the United States, not just us here at Wyoming Gun Owners. So we were there for oral arguments in January of this year. Same as in district court. It was snowing like crazy. Denver, January, you should expect that. And if you were there, and some of you folks joined us there, you know, having heard the arguments, it was a bloodbath. A bloodbath. And it wasn't a bloodbath for us. It was a bloodbath for Ed Buchanan's lawyers, for Bridget Hill's lawyers, for Mark Gordon's lawyers. It was tough to watch, actually, because I wanted to break out laughing because the judges were ruthless in their questioning against the state's lawyers, because this law is so vague that no one can understand it. It's so vague that to err on the side of caution, they said we have to give the state all of our donors. And their goal here was to shut us down forever, because don't forget the genesis of this. 2020, late that year, this is the height of doxing. This is the height of liberal organizations who are putting, pro-gun lawmakers' names online. You have Supreme Court justices who are being stalked. You have people outside of their homes. You've got pro-gun lawmakers, congressional level, their names are being published. U.S. senators, Senator Hawley from Missouri, he had folks outside of his home, almost broke into his home. This was not a time, and neither is now, by the way, to have liberal crazies having access to names and addresses of conservative donors who support organizations like WYGO. And that all came up in various bits and starts during oral arguments in the 10th Circuit in Denver in January of this year. So it was a great day. It was a great day, and it was clear to us that a victory was at hand. And so we had to wait. I mean, dude, we had to wait a long time. January of 2023, all the way until just last week, late October of 2023. We had to wait that long to get an opinion, a decision from the 10th Circuit. But boy, when we got it, it was worth the wait. If you haven't yet read it, you can read it. It's all over our website. It was a monumental victory. The 10th Circuit, same as the lower courts, didn't like all of our arguments. Again, you're always going to have that in these civil rights style cases. But they agreed with us at the end of the day that Wyoming's campaign finance disclosure law is unconstitutionally vague, and it leads to drastic ability for abuse against people who simply want to talk about their candidates for elected office at election time. Huge victory, but it literally began when we passed Stand Your Ground law. It began way back then. And ever since that time, as our power grew in Cheyenne, and as we destroyed Fix Nix in 2019, and as our members destroyed the rhinos who were pushing that in the elections in 2020, each time we notched our belt with a policy victory or an electoral victory via our members, the rhinos got scared, and they knew they had to find a way to try to muzzle us for forever. They tried and they failed. And guys, I could not be more proud of this organization, of all of you guys who have helped us so much along the way. As it stands right now, As of this very moment, I believe I can tell this. If not, I hope that our lawyers watch this in advance and tell me not to publish it. But as of right now, our counsel has spoken with the state of Wyoming, with Governor Gordon's lawyers, with Bridget Hill's lawyers, this gal right here. There we go. And with former Secretary of State Ed Buchanan's lawyers. And they said, you know what? We're not going to push this. We're not going to appeal our defeat anymore. They could appeal their defeat to an even higher panel of the 10th Circuit. We had a 3-judge panel that considered this case. What they could do at the state is appeal and go to an en banc hearing. What that means is, and it's en banc, E-N space B-A-N-C, en banc, which means every judge in the 10th Circuit would consider the case. They did not do that, or they are not going to be doing that anyway. And we won. We won. And again, it's a major victory. Sure, for me personally, I enjoyed this because they came after me as part of this. It's a much bigger victory for Wyoming gun owners because what WYGO represents is a real threat to the established rhino order here in Cheyenne. We love being that established threat. But mostly it's a victory for the First Amendment and for freedom in general. If we ever lose our ability to criticize our lawmakers, especially at election time, our country is over. The First Amendment and the Second Amendment are inherently linked. If we lose either amendment, it's over. It's over. And these days, the First Amendment is under about as much attack as the Second Amendment is. And while we are a Second Amendment gun rights organization, I knew the moment this case dropped in our lap that this situation would allow us to advance and protect the Second Amendment, but also the First Amendment, potentially here in Wyoming, but potentially all the way to circuit court. And that's exactly what happened. And so for those reasons, again, we could not be more happy with the outcome of this. We thank sincerely from the bottom of my heart, we thank Ed Buchanan for his voluptuous arrogance, which led to him thinking, oh, you know what? We're just going to do it. We're going to push our thumb down on these guys. We're going to silence them. We're going to squelch them and grab their donor names, because if he hadn't had that level of arrogance, we wouldn't have had this victory. So thank you, Mr. Buchanan, Judge Buchanan, for doing this. But again, all kidding aside, thank you to the members of WYGO. You guys have been relentless in the fight for freedom. We cannot thank you enough for helping us make this whole thing possible. We want to thank Steve Klein of Barr and Klein Law. He works in Wyoming, also in D.C. Fantastic lawyers. We cannot thank enough the Institute for Free Speech, IFS, their senior lawyer, Del Cold. What a guy. He was incredible to watch in argumentation, both in district court and in circuit court. It was great. If you guys haven't heard the arguments, the oral arguments in circuit court are published online. I believe district court was as well. You can find them on our website. A lot of fun to listen to that kind of stuff if you have time for that. Guys, going forward, though, there's a lot to do. There's a lot to do here in Wyoming. We spent a ton of money, and I mean a ton of money on this case, and we need your help. So first of all, donate. Straight up, going to say it, going to ask. We need your support to maintain this fight. Donate right now at wyominggunowners.org or go to joinwygo.com and get set up as a member today. We need your help. Next session, next year, it's an election year. We love election years. God knows we love election years. And we have a lot of fights coming up. We have to ban red flags here in Wyoming. Red flag laws are a real problem. They're in neighboring Colorado. They're going to come here if we don't watch out. We have to ban those. There's other fights coming as well. We have deadly gun-free zones still in our government buildings and our campuses. There's a lot going on, guys. Get involved in this fight. For now, that's the whole story. A lot of details we couldn't tell you guys in the past. I wanted to sit down and do this video, and it became a 39-minute long video. But we enjoy doing this for you guys. Stand with us. Join WYGO.com. And meantime, share this broadcast. Thank you.